Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Here we are. This is Sean Martin with ITSP Magazine, and I'm flying solo today. No Marco Ciappelli joining me. So it's just me and a guest having a good chat about AppViewX, and that is Murali Palanisamy. Thanks for joining me, Murali.
Yep. Great to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you on. We had a brief introduction to the company as part of our RSA conference coverage. So for folks who missed that, I encourage you to catch the now on-demand live stream that we did with the team. And we got a sneak peek into what AppViewX does. We're going to take a deeper dive today, understand why it was founded, who it was founded for, what problems it solves, why it's unique, and maybe some use cases that we can help folks relate to. And before we get to there, though, Murali, let's learn a little bit about you and your journey to join and be part of AppViewX first.
Yep, sure. So my career started primarily in the banking and financials, starting with Citibank, Merrill Lynch, and Bank of America. So in my previous role, I was part of the architecture engineering team. My role there was to look at internal business problems, identify vendor solutions, and then architect them, put them together, and then hand it off to the design or deployment team to implement it. So as part of that role, I've seen my seniors and my executives, my CTO. There was a precursor to this. This was pre-cloud days, where when it was hardware that every project that require compute, you literally have to procure the hardware, rack it, stack it, install it with a disk, and then configure it. And it's a long drawn 15-day process, right? And there were like a ton of people doing that, right? So the pre-cloud days, what we did is we brought in a project called Stateless, where the OS was not on the hardware. So the OS was in a filer, and then it would remote boot the remote boot from the top of the rack, and it would inventorize the hardware. If you power it on, it'll automatically boot, and then it'll say, I am this hardware with this much CPU, this much memory RAM, and I'm ready. You tell me what to do. And the user can then go select the hardware, select the OS, select the components, and say provision, and it'll provision the whole thing in 30 minutes to an hour. That was revolutionary at the time, because what used to take 15 days was now 30 minutes or an hour. And right now it's nothing, because you go to AWS, spin up an EC2 in minutes and all that. But at that time it was huge. Now we had to bring in or set it up in the data center. So what our CTO then did was work with different vendors, NetApp and HP and Cisco and all that, and say, I want it in this configuration. So you set it all up, and then you literally sell it as a SKU, right? All we do is connect power and network, and then we have the inventory up and running. We're able to use it, right? And because we built this, give it to me at a discount, you can go sell it and build this, right? That way, one, I am getting the early adapter benefit. Two, there is somebody supporting it and running it and maintaining it for me, and then I get to use that at a better price. So that was an interesting thought process, interesting business model. That I was part of that core team which built that automation per se. Post that, we had another business challenge. So I thought it would make sense to take a similar approach. And then I reached out to F5, and they referred me to some other company, and long story short, I reached out to my friend Anand and said, there is this problem, and can you fix it for us? Right? Can you build the product and fix it for us? And that's how this journey with AppViewX started. And then, things moved on where the problem was primarily started with F5, managing F5s, providing an application perspective view, or in other words, application perspective management of infrastructure components. It started with F5, expanded into CERT, because the moment you start looking at F5s, F5s is where sort of sits in between network and application. Now, it, the consumers of F5 are the application team, right? But the setup is done by the infrastructure team or the network team. So providing that application perspective view enables a lot better understanding, maintenance, and management of that particular hardware. So the goal at that time was to build an application perspective way of managing the infrastructure, including F5, WAF, ASM, policies, firewalls, and whatnot. So that's how the journey started. And once we were able to implement that, that became really successful. It became one of the strategic tools. And then there was pretty much a good interest in the market. And then I jumped over to the other side to help build that. And what we saw was once we manage a file, the next logical extension was the certificates, because every application team wants to manage the certificates, but they have no clue how to do it and whatnot. Yes, there is a PKI team which manages it, and there is a security team or whatnot, but the application team are the ones who are consuming it, but they don't know how it is set up or where it is set up, or they don't have the know-how of it. And same thing on the security side, right? So the application is involved in the security, but then they use a lot of shared services. They use a lot of firewalls, web application firewalls, which is typically part of the infrastructure team. Now, a lot of things have changed with the cloud where you have segmentation. The whole infrastructure is set up per application nowadays, right? With the virtualization, with the zero trust and whatnot. But having that visibility, having that way of managing and configuring and looking at the drift and compliance with the perspective of security, that was huge. And that is how this journey started. And as the name suggests, AppViewX, it's application perspective view, and X is the mathematic X, which is the infrastructure, anything in that infrastructure. And that's how the journey started. And I think the journey is continuing in a lot of ways. And the industry is also aligning to that perspective with DevSecOps, DevOps, and all these trends that we see here.
It's fabulous, and I appreciate that the backstory to the initial founding. And I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on kind of the vision. I mean, when marketing and branding is one thing, building a product is another thing, bringing it to market successfully is another, actually having customers buy it and be successful with it is another thing. And oftentimes the early stages of that can almost box an organization in. And it sounds like you have had a view that clearly was rooted in on-prem and hardware, and was able, I'll say easy, but was able to pivot and transition to cloud and containers and a world of machine to machine where perhaps even humans aren't even involved. So how did the team set the vision to enable that to happen?
Yeah. When I spoke about the story, right, and when I spoke about the application perspective, the app view story, that story has evolved, and the cloud has actually accelerated the transition. So it was not like a complete pivot for us from what we used to do in on-prem to cloud. It was a natural movement, natural adoption, because the industry is moving that way, right? And we saw that the industry is moving that way when we started working on on-prem, because the whole infrastructure, right, is built or set up for applications to consume, right? And so when we talk about applications, it's the end user or the end use case, that is the application that is consuming that infrastructure. Now, unless you know how that the application operations team or that particular app teams, if they don't know how that infrastructure is set up, it's literally a black box for them, right? So the whole movement about DevOps or full stack developers and DevSecOps is focused to enabling the infrastructure to support that application. And that's what cloud is doing as well. The cloud is all about bringing that agility to the application team so that they don't have to wait, or the infrastructure is an enabler for them, is not something that is holding them back with the agile methodologies and all the faster time to market abilities. Now, with AppViewX, it enables them, it adds that to their tool set to get to that value quicker, and then able to see it's primarily enabling app development, whether it's on-prem, cloud, or container, right? And then to provide an access management to that particular application, and then manage the the identities, right? The machine identities end to end, and providing them a single view, right? A single pane view across their application. And that was the vision that we started, and it perfectly aligns with the cloud migration, the container migration, and the zero trust adoption capabilities and whatnot.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So who is the? It sounds like they're clearly, when you start to get into AppSec and DevOps and DevSecOps and identity, there's a lot of teams involved and a lot of things. So how does this coordinate efforts across those different functions in a way that brings them together versus perhaps causing some chaos or lack of continuity, perhaps?
Yeah, and that is where, my experience in the financials and regulated industry, really helps, because there is literally no silver bullet to solve this problem, right? Because each organization is different. They have different silos, different teams running different systems and all that. And in most cases, the challenge is less technical and more political when you're talking about a unified management. And that is exactly where we built the ability of the platform in a way that you can federate access, where you can still define the policy, define the control, the different silos, different teams, the security team, the global information security team, the CISOs, and whatnot. So they define the policy, and the application team consumes the policy, right? They are able to implement the policy, what has been defined across the enterprise. And that's we are able to enable that using that platform. And we are able to solve, and that is why we have been a lot more successful in the regulated industries, because there is quite a bit of process involved, right? To see, application team wants to get things done quickly, right? They want to be agile, they want to develop, and they want to go to market like as soon as possible. But then there are set of process that is needed for regulated industries to follow, like ITSM, change management, change windows, and especially in banking and finance, there is only set number of change windows in a year. Now, how do you sort of support the application agility with the regulations, the regulatory requirements that are there? And that is where, if you give them abilities to automate and implement and give that control, right? So you're defining the policy, you say this is how it should be, and you're letting those silo teams to define what is needed and give the key to press the button to the application team, then they can call the shots they have the power to pull the trigger, but they don't have the capability to reload, right? All that setting is done by the individual teams, and the app team sort of consumes it. And that has given a pretty good uh, uh, control, or rather balance of control, right? Where you decide what you want to give and what you want to control. And that solves the political problem and the technical aspect as well, right? Because it sort of enables both the teams to do their stuff and able to get to market quicker.
Yeah, there's always the political, always the operational segmentation that's different everywhere, regardless of
Yeah.
the underlying technology, right? You might choose technology based on how things line up, but over time that changes as well. How do you, when you say define policies and enable control and give developers a button to push, can you walk through that scenario for me? Because I can
Yeah,
picture defining what the infrastructure looks like and maybe hardening it and ensuring it's up to date with patches and some of that in the policy, and I don't know, do you get into the app view for what components are being used and how it's configured? So kind of talk to me through the policy and the controls, and what does it mean when the engineer actually pushes the button to say go?
yeah. So the way the platform works is the 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 individual security teams, right, or the ADC teams, or the firewall teams, or even the crypto teams, they define how the enterprise uh, uh, policy needs to be. So they templatize it, and they can say, bronze, gold, silver, platinum, whatever type of service, and they define as these are the different options we offer you. If you pick this, you get it done within 30 minutes. If you take the standard process, it's done in 30 minutes. You take a non-standard process, it takes 5 hours or whatever, right? Then people sort of gravitate towards a more standardized and more agile approach. And with that, they are able to rather streamline them, or rather herd them to a standardized way of doing things. Now, you don't have to enable 100 million options, right? You give them maybe 10 options, 5 options, whatever that appetite is for that particular organization. And you tell them, this is how you can do it. You are basically dictating or defining how, if you take certificates, right? These are the 5 ways you can securely request certificate and deploy it on your endpoint. Now, they get to pick any one of those 5, right? You can select anything you want as long as it fits in this 5 things, right? Then it makes it a lot more easier, right? Otherwise, everybody would want, if you go to a restaurant, if there is unlimited customization, you will want this and that, and then add-ons and all those things. But then there is only 5 things to choose. It makes it a lot more easy, right? You can eat, but you can eat these 5 things in there, and that is
Can you give
repeatable.
me an example of, maybe not all 5, but maybe just the 2 examples for the cert, just to kind of paint a picture for us, what one
Yeah,
might include versus a different one?
yeah. So see, if you look at certificate, typical enterprise that is requesting for certificate, right? The way they would have normally done is they would have gotten and generated a CSR, submitted it to the CA, gotten the certificate in an email, taken it, deployed it into an end device manually, and they could use different type of endpoints. They could have used a JKS key store, or KDB, whatever different key stores they might use. Now, the way we would standardize is, you tell us where you want the certificate to be, which, let's take Linux, for example. In your Linux server, where do you want the certificate to be? What type of certificate do you need, right? Or what type of cert store you want to need? You want it as a JKS format, a PEM format, whatever format. You tell me the location, you tell me the format, and you tell me the certificate CN. These are the 3 things you give me. Everything else, you don't have to worry about it. because it's not like 90% or 99% of the application teams don't care what type of certificate it is, whether it's an EV certificate or a domain validated certificate, any of those, right? They want a trusted certificate, and this is their CN, and this is the device, and they want to use it. If they give me those three information, I would give them, let's say, for example, they want a Java key store. We would basically generate a Java key store with the certificates and keys in there and deploy it into that end device so that it's fully automated, right? And they got what they want. There is no human involvement. A human didn't generate the key, and when a human generates the key, you don't know whether he generated it on his laptop, on on his personal machine, and then right, copied it over and whatnot, right? So this one,
Put it in
everything
GitHub.
GitHub or whatever, right? So this one, everything is synchronized, and you can be rest assured that to that endpoint, the key was securely generated or deployed and secured, and that's the standard way of doing it. Now, it could be that's an average security. Now, if you want an enhanced security, high assurance, right? You can even decide to use a HSM, right? And say, this is the HSM I want to use, this location, and this is a certificate. Then we would basically set that up, configure it, so that the device talks to the HSM and generates a certificate. That can be fully automated. Now, like that, if you have medium assurance, high assurance, right, all, things like that, you can define that as an a la carte, and then they pick that. And once they pick it, it is automated and deployed. Same thing with cloud. If they decide to use Amazon AWS ACM or Azure Key Vault, and they say, okay, this is what the certificate I want. This is the ACM, and this is my tenant info and all that. Then we would basically can orchestrate it and deploy it, and that simplifies it, automates it, and then the power is in the application team to request and deploy. But then the control of what the parameters is in the security team. They define what needs to be done, what parameters, what algorithms to use, right? What key types to use, what key length to use. All that is controlled. And that is an enterprise decision. That's not an application decision. The application decision is what type or what certificate CN is needed, what service name is needed, those type of things.
And can you also set, based on the type of application, if it's heavily financially oriented, or if it's just a partner portal with no money transferring, you might have different risk levels and therefore different options for devs, right?
Exactly. And that's the tiers that you can define, right? That you want the platinum tier of security, or like super secure, high secure, medium secure, whatever. So internally you can name the offerings so that the application team picks the right one to consume and deploy. And based on the selection, you can define how you're securing the key store, how you're securing the keys, or how you're securing the policy. All of that can be defined by the enterprise security team, right? And same thing goes to the firewall, same thing goes to the ADCs, F5s, and web application firewalls and all that. There are certain parameters that the application team can tweak or change, and there are certain parameters that the enterprise security team or enterprise infrastructure team has to change. Now, there is a good balance if both of them have the right knobs and they use them responsibly.
And that seems to be the key, obviously. Hence the platform and the solution. But just without this, they would either choose to do nothing, right? Don't bother protecting it, or forget the cert, or if they care, they'll try to do the cert, and we all know how difficult that can be, right? So procuring it and managing it and tuning it and configuring it can be a real pain. So automating that, even just on its own, is a huge thing.
Yeah. See, what we have seen customers do? Either they give a lot of control to the app teams because they cannot restrict them, and then the app teams decide what they want to do with it, and then there is a reactive audit done to see if they are following the process and whatnot. Or they have a lot more restrictive controls, right? And security, in my opinion, should be an enabler, because the moment you put a lot more controls, people will try to find shortcuts. So if for an app team, right, if there is restrictive controls and they're not able to do a lot of the standard things that they would want to do, they would try to use self-signed certificates. And the moment they start doing that, whether it is dev or non-fraud, UAT, whatever, it seeps into the organization. And then there is a culture of using self-signed certificate as an acceptable culture. So it's important that we enable the app teams, but at the same time secure the environment. And once we do that, then we have a successful partnership in getting the whole enterprise secure.
So your background is rooted in finance, and you mentioned a lot of success in regulated industries like finance, and it's easy to see where perhaps a mature organization might have a mature security program and have a pretty solid view of how to manage AppSec and DevOps together as part of that. How do you see some of the non-regulated industries picking this up? Where's the success coming for them, where they may not have the compliance driver behind them, but they still need the security parts of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this whole pandemic, right? See, one thing I keep telling is the cloud migration made the data center perimeter disappear. The pandemic made the retail office space, the retail location, or the employees location disappear. Right now, people are in a hybrid work model where pretty much they could be anywhere. They could be sitting in the middle of a desert and then still working as well, or middle of a mountain and whatnot. Now, when both these happen, when the perimeter is slowly blurring, the security becomes the center focal point. And when we talk about security, what are we securing now, right? The identity becomes the core or the center of security, right? The identity would mean human identities and also machine identities, because you have to trust the machines talking to each other and humans talking to those machines as well. Now, even in the non-regulated industries, they are also looking at security as the core. And again, there are so many articles out there which talks about cybersecurity being if it was cybersecurity alone, if it was a country, it would be third largest country in the world, right, after US and China. Right? It's so much money and so much effort spent there just to secure. Now that trend, especially with the pandemic and hybrid work, they are now looking at how they can secure and focus their efforts there. And with identity becoming the focal area, they are also looking at an ability to secure that and simplify and automate. And because of the shortage of the cyber staff, automation is the way. And they are obviously looking at ways to automate and then simplify the whole deployment model.
And so many questions I could ask. Let's see where to go next, because let's talk about the automation, because if you automate something that's not well defined, you're just speeding up errors and things like that, right? And amplifying the whatever it is, you're amplifying it, good or bad. And it sounds like with the automation, you're also abstracting some of the details that perhaps the team may not need to know, which if they tried to figure out, they might make human errors anyway. So I think what I'm trying to get at is the automation is a way to kind of not just speed things up, but perhaps also to reduce human error. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering if you have any examples of where that is true, if in fact I'm capturing that correctly.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of success stories. Customers who are automated and then reduce their time to value or total time to value for a particular change, or the time taken to implement a change from days to hours, right? And it frees up. See, automation is not about cutting a bunch of people and then doing the repetitive tasks and all that. It is about upskilling your existing staff to think about how we can optimize instead of focusing on doing the day-to-day task. What would be How can we do this better, and how can we automate this so that the process is streamlined? So that thought process comes into the teams. And that's what we have seen enables a successful organization to sort of upskill themselves. See, if you need a completely new team to come and automate, it is very difficult. Because there is, again, the technology can only do so much, but there is a political angle which sort of derails things. What we have done is we have leveraged the existing teams, enable them to automate so that one, it makes their life easier. They don't have to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning to do something and whatnot. And then they are also, instead of doing a mundane operational task, they are upskilling themselves to look at a more strategic thinking as to what I can do to optimize or get it better. Automation is a continual process. It has to evolve. It has to continuously be enhanced. Now you are basically enabling that particular member or the employee to think differently, think in a more strategic sense instead of just doing operational tasks. And that is when they become champions and rather enable the team and enable themselves to start thinking that way, and then to show value, to show business value. And there are a whole bunch of success stories, customer success stories, use cases where we have seen. I was traveling to Australia to meet a customer. We were in Uber, and he was implementing changes with his laptop while we were there, and he was showing me how he was able to do that with AppViewX. Right, so that's cool. It's cool to see that they are able to. I mean, he is not stuck in office. If it's otherwise, he would be in office, sitting there in front of the desk and doing things while we were driving to dinner, or rather Ubering to dinner. And while going there, he was able to finish his task, which was scheduled to be completed at that time. And he was just making sure things were running and the results were there. So that enables him, right? And that the moment that it enables him, he becomes a champion for automation, and it becomes a fan of automation. And he is then starting to think, okay, what else can I do, right, to make it better.
And on that note, innovation and being a champion for not just automation, but for doing things in a better way. What's on the horizon for AppViewX? I mean, we briefly touched on machine to machine. I don't know if IoT is a big driver. Any additional changes in cloud or drivers? I don't know, ICS. I don't know what's on the horizon.
Yeah, see, there is a huge focus, or the huge interest in terms of IoTs, because again, everything is now connected, and when everything is connected, identity becomes the central focus area for that. Automating IoT onboarding device, I mean, any device per se, right? And then security, having that app perspective security, right? And looking at consolidating all the tools to provide an integrated way of managing it. So those are some of the interesting things so that you would hear from us, where you have a single pane for a life cycle of a device and security of the device, right? Life cycle security of the device. Yeah, I think that's what is upcoming.
I love it. And for those listening, I'm sure we'll have a chance to link to some resources, perhaps some case studies to help further visualize and understand how different organizations, large and small, can leverage AppViewX. Murali, it's been a fantastic conversation. I have 100 questions in my head still, but we're going to leave it here. We'll let people soak in and absorb everything you had to say today. No question, helping developers be agile is critical, and doing so in a way that doesn't overload them with security problems or tasks or challenges, but does it in a way that the security team knows it's being done, and the app team can actually just do what they need to do and continue to innovate. So fantastic to chat with you. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to do that again.
Likewise, Sean. It was great talking to you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you for listening.